Hello, Alexa. Welcome. I am so excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So jumping right in, can you tell us what is POCUS and who do you serve?
Yes. So POCUS is a revenue data platform. So we help go-to-market teams, primarily at product-led growth companies, unlock their product usage data to turn it into revenue. So more tactically, what we do is we give go-to-market teams, so sales, customer success, RevOps, a complete view of their user base, both customer fit data, product usage data, so that they can surface the right opportunities and quickly take action. So in terms of who we serve, mostly mid-market product-led growth companies, customers like Miro, Webflow, Loom, Superhuman, lots of self-serve users, and a sales team as well.
That's awesome. And we're definitely going to dive into a lot of the terms that you mentioned as relates to product-led growth, product-led sales, go-to-market, and all of that. But I do want to first dive a little bit further into POCUS and your journey as a founder. So can you tell me, how did your background lead you to starting this company? How did you come up with the idea and what brought you here?
Yes. So before POCUS, I was in revenue operations. And I was trying to hack together a lot of the things that I built with POCUS and we built with POCUS for other companies. So as many RevOps folks can probably relate, many companies have lots of data and that data lives across various places. And this is what I was experiencing. It lives in BI dashboards or your CRM or your internal admin database. And so what I was doing is trying to take that data and have it make sense for our sales and customer success teams and make it really actionable. And it's a hard task to do. So that's originally where I saw the pain point in terms of iterating on the types of pain points that I wanted to kind of dive headfirst in and really spend, the rest of my career on. That was really when I went to Stanford for business school, met my co-founder, and we ideated on a bunch of ideas around the pain points that I saw in revenue operations before landing on this one.
So is the product that you have today, is that the idea that you launched with, or have you pivoted along the way?
So this is very similar. So I'll say before we even started writing any code or launching our product or doing anything, we did probably like 4 or 5 months of just customer discovery. So I had various ideas all related to RevOps, sales, how do we make sales teams more efficient with data? So I'd say we pivoted before we landed on the idea of POCUS. But once we kind of had this aha moment of this is exactly what we need to solve in the market pull, which was about 2 years ago when we started POCUS, it's been pretty consistent. I'd say we've had the same vision of how do we unlock data for go-to-market teams. I'd say the way that we actually, the features we build and what we prioritize and how we position this to the market, there's been iterations over time, but the vision has been pretty consistent.
Got it. Was there a moment when you were building this that you felt like, aha, we've cracked product market fit? Was there a single moment that you can look back on and point to and say, that's when I knew that we were onto something real?
Yes. So I think that so there was two things. So when we were ideating on our product, and you can have lots of different ideas through the ideating journey, I remember once we landed on this idea for a product-led sales platform, it felt very different than any other idea we had. And the reason it felt different is we had design partners that were eager to spend an hour with us a week. And they said, once you build this, we'd be very eager to pay. And they wanted to give feedback. We had VCs coming to us with term sheets when we were just a seed stage company. There was kind of, our minds were racing of everything that we could build. And there was this kind of market pull rather than a market push. Like things were coming to us rather than us kind of having to go after them. And I remember when we were raising our seed round we went with first round capital. And I remember in the final pitch, Josh Koppelman, who's kind of like the OG seed investor, he was like, wow, this sounds like promise market fit. Like this sounds like something you don't have a product yet, but this sounds like you've figured out the problem in the market so well that this is something that will become huge. And I remember him saying that. And then I'd say it took us probably a year after that to actually feel the true product market fit. Maybe like 7, 8, 9 months, which I can talk about. That felt different as well. Like when you have product market fit with your real product in the market, there's the similarities of where you have market pull rather than market push, but you have a lot more data. You can look at usage metrics. You can look at willingness to pay. You can look at the features that folks are using and how they're using your product. And so I'd say the consistency between both is the pull rather than the push, but the actual data that you have looks a bit different.
Got it. Josh is definitely, one of the OGs and great investor. How much have you raised? You've done a seed round and a Series A, right?
Yes. So we've raised total around 23 million.
Got it. And how big is your team today?
We're about 25 people.
Okay. So
yeah,
getting bigger, but not huge.
Yeah, it feels much bigger than it was 2 years ago when it was just my co-founder and I. So I can say that for sure.
Sure. So you talked about the customers that you're going after, mid-market, product-led growth. Is it, do you have a specific ICP or specific vertical or type of company that works best with POCUS or that you go after?
Yeah, so within SaaS, we target even more specifically product-led growth companies. So companies that have a self-serve motion, and the reason being, they have a lot of data. So these types of companies will have millions of users on their product. And so it makes it, they feel this pain point of sales saying, where do I even start? Who do I go after? Who is right for conversion from our free product to our paid or our, individual tier to team to enter a prize plan? So that's really companies that we say like between 100 and 3,000 employees that have a really strong self-serve motion as well as having a sales team. So within software right now, it's PLG also within software. But I'll say like we have bigger visions and kind of problems that we want to tackle. I just think it's very important in the early days when you have a small team to keep your ICP as focused as possible.
Sure. Would you care to share that vision with us? What does the future of POCUS look like 5-10 years out?
Yeah, so our vision is to unlock the power of data for everyone. So as probably many people have seen, there's been a lot of advancement in the modern data stack, which has been really powerful for data teams, product teams, engineering teams. But go-to-market teams have still been left in the dust in terms of unlocking that data. Specifically, the rise of data warehouses like Snowflake are incredible, but sales teams can't directly tap into Snowflake. And so what we're doing is unlocking that incredible data for go-to-market teams. So think sales, customer success, marketing. So we're starting with this wedge of product-led growth, but we really see, every company in the world being able to use POCUS to unlock data.
Very cool. Definitely a trend. And I heard a line, I think it was from Elena Verna, who's like one of the PLG gurus. I love her stuff that she posts. So she said that every company that doesn't have a PLG motion will need to have a PLG motion. So any sales-led motion, any sales-led company that doesn't have a PLG motion is going to need to. And every company that currently is PLG only is going to need to layer on a product-led sales motion, which is what you empower today, right?
Yeah, I'll say I think of product-led as more of a spectrum. I think that there's very product-led companies that, you think of the Slacks of the world, where they have the self-serve motion, they had virality. It was easy to get up and running without salespeople in the early days. But there's a spectrum. There's other companies that start top-down sales and then layer in a product-led motion, or maybe they don't have a complete, self-serve product, but they have self-serve features that they can use as a wedge. And HubSpot did this early days. Like they originally weren't self-serve, but they had different features that they can use as a wedge to capture a broader pipeline and a broader audience. So I have maybe a similar view of Elena, but a different way of saying it. I would say every company will have a hybrid motion of where there will be some sort of product-led element, some sort of sales-led element, but there's different ways that you can lean as a company.
Great. Let's drill into that. But first, let's lay some of the foundational terms for the audience. If folks don't know, can you give like a brief intro, the crash course on, product-led growth, product-led sales? How are they different? How do people use those terms?
Yeah. Yep, really simply. So product-led growth is using your product itself as the main driver for acquisition, retention, expansion. So I'll go back to the Slack example. You can sign up for Slack, you can use it, you can pay for it, you can upgrade without ever talking to a human. The product is driving that.
And usually that's accompanied either with a freemium or some sort of free trial type model, right?
Yep, or self-serve, exactly. So then where product-led sales comes in is when you layer sales on top of that motion. There is tons of data, and what it is sales is using that existing data, those existing users, to then drive acquisition, retention, and expansion. So how this is different than traditional selling is in traditional sales, you pick up the phone, cold call someone, explain them the value of the product, and then after you go through a 3 to 6 month sales cycle, you deliver the product and they get value. Where this is different in product-led sales is end users are getting value first, and then sellers are leaning into that value in order to drive maybe conversion from the free plan to the paid plan or an upsell and expansion.
Right. So instead of traditional sales where it's calling and saying, hey, I think this product would be great for you. Here's why you should buy. It's, hey, you know that 17 people in your company are currently using this product, and here's why you should subscribe to whatever additional tier or enterprise plan or whatever is necessary. And I think it goes back to as well what you said about the spectrum, because it's not just like 0-1 of you're either a free customer or paid customer. A lot of times these are good for revenue expansion. So somebody may be on a specific tier and you can use sales and product data in order to leverage that into greater land and expand strategies, more seats, more licenses, more features, additional tiers, et cetera, right?
Yep, exactly. Product-led, it's definitely become buzzwordy recently. But really how I see it is using your product as a driver of the way that you make money. And then product-led sales is being extremely data-driven in your go-to-market motion.
Yeah. It's funny because I was talking, last week's episode was with April Underwood, who was Chief Product Officer at Slack, and she was doing, they're the case study of product-led growth, or one of them, right, with Atlassian and some of those. They were doing it before the term was coined. So I was kind of digging into some of that with her. So for a startup, and let's go from the startups that are currently in a PLG motion, they have a product with some sort of freemium offering. They have usage. At what point does it make sense to layer in product-led sales?
Yeah. Quickly before I answer that, it's funny. Slack CEO is, there's some articles of him maybe like 5-6 years ago saying, we're a product-led growth business. We'll never need sales. And then that quickly changed. I feel like there was a myth that product-led growth companies didn't need sales, and now they have hundreds of salespeople on their team. And they're early sellers. They call them other things like support or specialists, whatever it was. But it is people selling. It's just a different way of selling. So,
there is something incredible about these companies that were able to get to. I heard that. Notion got to 10 million in ARR before hiring their first salesperson, just on product led, right? And Miro 7 million in these companies. But eventually everybody should layer on a product led sales motion. So let's figure out when is that right time?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think some people have really hard numbers of it needs to be 1 million in ARR, 10 million in ARR. My perspective is it really depends. It comes down to the CEO, the leadership team's vision for growth. So there are some companies, I think especially bootstrapped companies, that started out like Calendly and Zapier and Webflow. These product-led growth companies, they started bootstrapped. They didn't raise venture capital for a while. So for them, they had to stay efficient as long as possible. Which meant not hiring sales reps. So they would rather stay efficient, keep burn low, rather than accelerating revenue. Whereas some others, PLG companies who say, we're ready to dive in. We want to grow revenue by 10x over the next year. You can't do that just from PLG. You'll need an accelerator from a sales rep. So I think it really depends on the vision and the strategy set by the CEO and what, he or her want to kind of see in terms of growth multiples. I'd also say it depends on the complexity of the product that you're selling. So Canva, for example, they are primarily like a D2C product in ways. Like a lot of the end users sign up for Canva and use it. They just started to navigate into B2B, which is when they had to start bringing on sellers to the organization. So I think Canva is probably the example of waiting the longest in terms of revenue to add a sales team. And the reason being, it's not that complicated of a sell if you're just going to individual users. Where it gets more complicated is when you have to navigate an organization. So it's the complexity of the sell and the complexity of the actual product that you're delivering.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there that stood out. The product itself and whether or not you're delivering value to the individual or to the enterprise, I think that's probably one of the key questions, right? Because a lot of these product-led motions, you're solving a problem for an individual, but then once you get into sales, you need to change that conversation to like, here's why an enterprise plan makes sense for you, right?
Exactly. And that's why product-led sales is required, because the user and the buyer are different. So you're selling Slack to, I don't know, Apple. There's going to be a bunch of end users of Slack at Apple that love the product, but the person in marketing is not responsible for actually buying it. You have to go to IT or through procurement and all of that. And so you need a salesperson to navigate that. All the security requirements, communicating with procurement, building the business case, showing the ROI, working with the champions to tell that story, and navigating the organization and rolling up the different pockets of Slack users to one big enterprise contract. So it's just stuff that the product can't do itself.
Yeah, such a good point that the user is different from the buyer. And in a traditional sales motion, you reach out to the individual, even if it's an inbound, right? That person downloaded a white paper or attended a webinar. Usually there's some sort of buying intent there. But once you're going into this motion on product-led sales, you have to change that approach, because that person that's using the product, maybe they'll be a champion internally, but they're not the decision maker. They don't have the buying power necessarily.
Exactly. And I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but typically as you navigate larger organizations, you have to get IT involved, which is typically not the end user of your product.
Right. So what are some of let's get practical, first steps in implementing this? You talked about, who can do it. Oftentimes it starts with, you're not even hiring salespeople for the first sales. It's happening in customer success, or, others within the company can handle those first sales in a product-led motion. Any other steps that a startup that's kind of making that transition or crossing to that new strategy, what can they implement?
Yeah, so I would say if you're purely product-led growth, all self-serve, don't really have a customer-facing team yet, I would say, or a sales team yet, I would say you need to figure out why you're adding sales. Is it because you want to accelerate revenue? Is it because you find that customers are reaching out to you, users are reaching out saying, hey, can you help me figure out how to roll this out to my organization? That could be another reason for better customer experience. Like, you need to figure out why are you layering on sales. And then when doing that, I would say there's a lot that you should think about when layering on sales. So first is definitely the type of people that you bring on. So the person that has been selling traditional enterprise sales at Salesforce for 10 years is not going to be your fit. You need to find someone who has been doing this product-led sales motion. It's a really different way of selling. It's leading with value. It's having empathy for end users. It's kind of thinking more holistically as a business of, how do I take this feedback I'm learning around product usage and, relay that information back to product and marketing. So it's much more cross-functional, much more kind of a different way of interacting with your end users. So I would say that. And then B is making sure that you are using your data and making it actionable. And this is, of course, where POCUS comes in. But if you hire a salesperson and they join a PLG company, so we'll go back to the Slack example. Maggie Ha was one of the early sellers at Slack, and we talk a lot about what it looked like. Her first couple of, months was just saying, okay, who are the self-serve users on the product, and where should I start having these conversations? And you need to be ready to equip your sellers with that information so that it's not worth their time, especially in the early days, to be cold calling. Like, you should be doing warm outbound based on your existing users and helping unblock them through their enterprise sales cycle. So I'd say when you figure out why you need sales and you're ready to have sales, I would say A, be very careful about who you bring on, and B, make sure that you have the technology in place to make your data accessible and actionable for sales teams.
So on the data side, obviously POCUS empowers the go-to-market team with that data on the product usage side. How specifically, can you share some key features just to make it like really tactical and give people a sense of what it actually looks like day to day? Like, how, I'm a salesperson. I log into POCUS. What am I seeing? What am I looking for? How do I decide, who to call, who to send an email to, et cetera?
Yep, exactly. So I'll talk about kind of first the data stack that we typically see in place when we come in and kind of what is helpful for a PLG company to have set up. So typically what a PLG company will need is a data warehouse for sure. So this is Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, somewhere to store all your product usage data. So for Slack, this will be a data warehouse that's capturing information around number of users, how often are they logging in, who did they send invites to, number of messages sent, number of channels created. You need this information to figure out who your power users are. And then second, you'll usually have a CRM. And your CRM, like HubSpot if you're earlier on, Salesforce if you're later on, that's capturing kind of opportunity data and interactions that you're having with your customers. So the real core of what POCUS is doing is bringing those two data sets together. So one of our core features and kind of the magic behind POCUS is our revenue data graph. And what we're doing is taking product usage data from the data warehouse and customer fit firmographic opportunity data from CRM and bringing that together in a way that can give a holistic view to a sales rep. And so this lets RevOps be able for the first time ever to bring that data together, do those joins and unlock the data for their sales team, which would typically be months of data work for the data engineering team. So then what a sales rep sees when they log into POCUS is first they'll log into their inbox and they'll see the leads that they have to go after today. And they'll say, all right, I should be going after, Maggie at Slack. Let's use that as an example. I can see what Maggie has done in the product, who she is, who she's invited, how many channels she's created. I can then click into the Slack workspace and see what's going on at a holistic level. Then I can assume that Maggie's a great person to reach out to. Then what I would do is in POCUS, I can create a contact in Salesforce. I can directly send an outreach sequence. I can create a deck with product usage metrics so I can quickly take action from there. There's a lot of other features of POCUS, but I'd say kind of the two key ones that every single customer will take advantage of is the revenue data graph for bringing data together, and then the POCUS inbox to actually understand who do I reach out to, am I reaching out to them, and what's the best action to take.
Got it. And those triggers to reach out to somebody who's using the product, are those things that a user sets up? Is that algorithmically generated by POCUS? Is it a combination? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a combination. So what I like to say and what I kind of have learned through my experience is with all of this, you need art and science. And so the art piece is when you log into POCUS for the first time, typically sales leaders or RevOps have a really good understanding of the playbooks that they want to run. I want to, every time I see someone from IT log into our product, I want to reach out proactively to help them understand what the product is and kind of get ahead of that buying process. Or maybe every time I see that someone is senior and they sent 5 other people invites to the product, that's probably someone good to reach out to because they can champion this. So there's playbooks that sales leaders and RevOps will know that they can program in to POCUS as the signals and triggers and kind of playbooks for reps to run. We also have the science piece, which comes in with POCUS Predicts, which is our AI product to historically look at your conversion rates of what playbooks perform well and then recommend that to our end users to say, we think you should be reaching out to this type of customer base for this reason.
Got it. Are there specific metrics that often signal that a user is ready to be monetized or that they're ready to be reached out to by sales, or maybe not the user, maybe the account, right? So that's, I think, something that we should talk about as well, is the difference between, what's called product qualified leads versus product qualified accounts, right?
Definitely. So a product qualified lead is typically a user or a contact that you think is ripe for conversion to any type of goal, whereas a product qualified account is that entire account or domain could be ready to convert to that next stage. We've seen product qualified teams, product qualified workspaces. We've seen it all in PLG. It all depends on your conversion goals, because you might have a goal for SDRs to convert users from free to paid. You might have another goal to expand users from the team plan to the enterprise plan. You might have another goal to consolidate a bunch of workspaces into one enterprise contract. Each of those goals will have a different set of product qualified leads or product qualified accounts that will be ripe for conversion. And so, typically we see like every company has the same 5 to 6 goals, and there's a series of playbooks. And we typically, even if you run the data, we typically see it's pretty consistent. But in terms of the art and science piece, it's plugging in what you know works, what you've seen works, kind of the obvious ones, and then using the science to surface what maybe you didn't think of originally as what could be a product qualified lead.
Okay. Are there any specific playbooks that you can share, or anything that's just high level? I know that it's hard to talk in broad strokes without a specific example, but I'm sure that there are metrics like whether it's number of users in an account or utilization within a given user, things like that, or number of shares within an organization. Are there specific signals that are universal or almost universal?
Yeah, so I'd say that the broad playbooks are pretty consistent. The actual data that you're tracking really depends on the product, right? Like Miro is going to care about the number of Miro boards, whereas Zapier is going to care about the number of Zaps. But the broader kind of playbooks that I consistently see, the IT playbook that I mentioned, like every single person, if you're an enterprise seller, you're going to want to know when IT has started to use your product, because that means that there's a buying conversation. The enterprise consolidation playbook. So if you see that your Miro and there are 40 different teams within an account using Miro, that's time to reach out and get them consolidated onto one plan. Another one is when like a account kind of opportunity where maybe you're selling into the marketing team and you know there's 1,000 people in the marketing team, but only 20 licenses. That's an opportunity to expand within the org. So there's a pretty consistent, we have on our website as well, like a series of playbooks that you can look at from our customers or others that have developed these, but we see pretty consistent ones. It's just the actual metrics that look a little different.
Fantastic. Thanks for going through that. And we can definitely put a link to those resources in the show notes for those who want to read more on this topic. Can you talk to any specific pitfalls or obstacles that startups often find themselves running into when they're going on this journey of layering on product-led sales?
Yes. Not experimenting fast enough. So I see so many companies come and be like, we need to figure out what our PQL is. We're going to find one PQL, and that's going to be our magic PQL that's going to solve all our business problems. And they'll literally take 6 to 12 months figuring out what that PQL is. And that doesn't do anything. That's your data science team sitting in the background, just like playing around with numbers. You need to be experimenting really fast. Test different playbooks, test different PQLs or PQAs or different kind of goals that you want to hit. I think the people that get into analysis paralysis is really what is an obstacle that a lot of PLG companies face when adding in sales. And another one, like I said before, is hiring the wrong people. You really need to find someone that's cross-functional and works well with product, data, and marketing.
And when you say experimenting, you mean running campaigns or outreach and testing to see what's the close rate on those, what's the conversion rate, et cetera?
Exactly. What's the conversion rate? What's the increase in pipeline? How many meetings booked? What is, were we able to close these faster? Did we increase ACV? Like there's tons of experiments that you can run with how sales teams reach out to existing product users.
Okay. And these motions, they can be run in parallel, right? So an organization will continue to have their, organic product-led motion, layer in their product-led sales, and can also simultaneously have a traditional sales, whether it's outbound or inbound, without the product usage component, right?
Yep. So I'd say, again, it depends on the organization. Like Miro is one of our customers, and they just have such a crazy amount of self-serve users that they do literally zero cold outbound. All of it is warm outbound to existing users of the product. Whereas other companies have a mix. Maybe it's 50-50. It's, we have 50% of the company that's traditional reps that are going outbound, going top down, whereas another 50% is from the self-serve business. It really depends on kind of the virality of your product, the goal of leadership, lots of different metrics. But I've seen, it kind of goes back to our hybrid product-led spectrum conversation of really there's lots of different ways to make this work.
Yeah. I'm curious, for POCUS, you guys don't have, I believe, you don't have a product-led motion. Why is that? Is that specific to the product, or is that just a timing thing that you're going to add it later? I'm curious about that.
It's two things. It's one, timing, and two, our ICP. So first is we're 2 years in. We have 25 people. We need to be very focused on what we're building, and we cannot be building too much at once. So we found that there were other kind of features that we wanted to invest product time in, like this POCUS Predicts AI feature, before we did the self-serve features. The second thing is our ICP. So we started with mid-market customers. Mid-market customers are typically going to want you to go through a security review before tapping into their data warehouse. And there are some kind of security and like data best practices that we can provide to those companies. We will build a self-serve product, especially when we go down market to SMB. It's just not where we're starting today. And it goes back to the kind of hybrid conversation. We're starting with kind of where we are today. Like, we're thinking through different hacks to make it feel more product led. We will one day become more product led. It's just not where we're starting.
Interesting. I believe, from my experience, it seems to be more likely to be successful when companies go from product led. And I'm not talking about POCUS. I think you guys know what you're doing in the product led space. So I'm sure you'll keep on that trajectory. But when companies that are traditionally sales led try to go into product led, it's often more challenging than the other way around, where companies started product led and they layer in a sales led motion. Have you seen that to be true? And why do you think that might be?
I think there's challenges of both. I was talking to a sales leader who actually first was at Guru, and they went from traditional sales to product led, and then at Loom and went from product led to product led sales. And we were chatting about the differences of each and which are harder. And I truly think it's different. When you start sales led and go product led, the hard part is the culture shift, really. It's how do you make so that your sales teams are just not like going after every deal, and they're letting some deals stay in the self-serve motion. And it's really kind of changing the way that you incentivize salespeople. That's really hard. But it's also really hard to start product led and figure out, what do we do with this data? And how typically a lot of these organizations are pretty advanced in their company, but their sales motion is like a Series A sales motion. And so that's also really hard. So I think that it's hard in both directions, and it really comes down to committing. Like, I know Elena was at Amplitude, for example. They started traditional sales and then layered on product led. And it works. It's just like, you need to kind of draw a line in the sand as leadership and say, this is what we're doing. Like, we are now sales teams. You cannot go after these deals anymore because we're going to leave that to self-serve, and that's going to be a long-term play. So it's kind of, I think both are really hard. And it's kind of a matter of when you decide to do it, how you decide to do it, kind of how product-led you want it to be. Is it going to be completely self-serve, or is it just going to be a free trial? There's lots of different options.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge cultural component to it, and it needs to be, there needs to be strong alignment at the top of the organization to ensure that whichever organization came first and had that upper hand early on, whether it was product or sales, that they understand that the new world that the company is going into requires that partnership between both, right? What about from a KPI standpoint? Are there specific, we talked about, what are they? PQLs and PQAs. Are there other metrics that are worth tracking in this motion, or when you're transitioning to this motion? Are there other measures of success that you should be watching out for to see if you're on the right track?
Yeah, not exactly a KPI, but more of kind of way of analyzing data to determine if your motion is successful. I think it's important to A/B test your self-serve business versus your sellers. So there's going to be a segment of your users where even if you add a salesperson, there's not much added benefit compared to just the self-serve users getting to value on their own. And when I say not much benefit from adding a salesperson, I mean the sales cycle is just as long and the ACV is maybe lower than you would expect. But there's going to be another bucket of users that adding in a seller is going to completely increase the ACV and it's going to decrease the sales cycle. And so you need an A/B test to figure out what leads should remain in self-serve so that sales isn't cannibalizing those. And then what leads should be fed to a salesperson.
Makes sense. So going back to POCUS, your growth to date, what channels have been most important for your success so far? And maybe have there been any experiments that you've done from a growth perspective that haven't worked and you've learned lessons from?
Yeah, so I think we took a pretty not atypical path in the early days. So all of our channels are community and content. So we've done no paid, no outbound, nothing like that so far. It's all been around creating our 2,500 person Slack community and delivering content on our blog, our newsletter, LinkedIn, Twitter, podcast, etc. And the reason being is when starting POCUS, product-led sales was a new category. And we knew we needed to create a category, but we knew we couldn't do it alone. And so we wanted to involve this broader community of folks that were very passionate about creating product-led sales. So that was the origin, kind of where this all started of creating the content. And that goes really tightly with community and content and category creation. We are starting to experiment with other channels, but very, very early days just because we haven't needed to yet.
Yeah. And I've found you guys through the content that you're putting out there, really valuable stuff. So keep doing that. On the community side, is it salespeople, rev ops, a mix of all the above? Who's part of that community?
It's go-to-market teams at product-led growth companies. So sales, marketing, customer success, rev ops, growth, all folks that are very interested in how do we use product usage data to accelerate our go-to-market efforts.
Got it. And are the participants in the community, or is the community strategy about evangelizing the people that are using POCUS and leveraging that community for referrals, et cetera? Or is it more just kind of a interaction with them to better the product, get feedback, et cetera?
Yeah, so also probably a little atypical. The community has never been to drive people to POCUS. It's never been how do you use POCUS better. It's always been how do we help each other with product-led sales. And so it's not all POCUS customers. It's many POCUS customers, many non-POCUS customers. And it's really the goal of the community has always been how do we help educate each other on this new category of product-led sales so we can build the category together. So we don't even track like attribution from the community to our own pipeline. But what it does help with is brand awareness and understanding that we are the category creators of product-led sales and we genuinely want to help you figure out product-led sales at your organization. And then that drives people to our content and then that drives people to request a demo. Yeah.
Category creation is a very unique challenge, and we could probably do a whole episode just on that. So kudos to you for taking that on. It's not an easy task at all.
Thank you.
Where's marketing in all this? You know, obviously product and sales have a big role in this, but marketing teams, growth teams, what do they need to be focused on in a successful product-led sales motion?
Oh, I think marketing is probably the most important. I know this wasn't your question, but for us, marketing was one of our first hires, actually, which is also atypical for a startup.
A content person, a community person, a bit of both?
I hired a product marketer who can do everything. So she actually was one of our first 20 members of the POCUS community. So she really does everything, though. She does community content, product marketing, demand gen. Well, we haven't really started demand gen, but everything.
I'm a big believer that the first marketing hire should be a product marketer generalist.
Exactly, 100%. And I can chat about that as well. In terms of marketing at PLG companies, think that, or that are trying to do product-led sales, I think it's important to actually hire a marketer before you hire sales. To figure out, first of all, you have to have the distribution, and you have to make sure that have enough self-serve signups that are coming to you for sales to be able to fish out of. Second, I think marketers, if you hire a good marketer, they're very good at figuring out the positioning that resonates, so that they can help accelerate sales getting ramped up, because they know what resonates and doesn't resonate by doing their own market research and discovery there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Self-servingly. What you mentioned that you have plans in the future to add a product-led motion for POCUS, and as you go to the SMB or go down market. Are there other channels that you're looking at in the near future? What growth channels do you think are going to be most important in the coming years for POCUS?
Yeah, definitely continuing to double down in community and content. One that we're just starting to think about is partnerships. We have a lot of inbound for partnerships, actually, both in the sales tech space and sales tooling, but also in the modern data stack. So I think that will be a huge channel for us that we haven't tapped into just yet.
I love partnerships as a channel. I think that it's one of the least sexy but most successful in B2B that people don't really talk about it as much, but I think it's a really good channel. But there's also a concern that when it comes to partnering with a company that has some sort of potential overlap. And then there's that thought in the back of your mind of like, they're partnering with us today, but maybe 2 years from now, they're going to try to replace us. Do you find any of that tension when speaking with potential partners or thinking about platforms? You talked about sitting in between the data warehouse platforms and the CRM. What if, Salesforce decides to add that middle piece, or what if Snowflake or whoever, right? Or Amplitude, whatever product.
Yep. Well, first of all, just based on how we're built, I don't think they can. Those I would not say. I would be very surprised if Salesforce was able to switch their entire strategy or would want to build what we're building. Second of all, though, what I would say, and I haven't done this for years yet, but the advice that I've heard from other founders that have been really successful with partnerships is, instead of this spray and pray model of partnering with everyone, think about the one or two or three that you're going to go really deep with. You're really going to understand what are kind of the synergies between our products. How can we help sell each other's product? What's most important for you and what's most important for us, and how do we make sure that that's happening? So my going into it, and maybe we can chat again in a year and I'll tell you how it went, it's definitely going to be leaning into one or two partnerships rather than trying to partner with everyone.
That definitely, it makes sense. It's a concern that a lot of founders have when talking with potential partners, right? Do you have well, we can skip that. I was going to ask about competitors, but we don't have to talk about it.
You can ask.
Well, how do you think about the competitive landscape today? Because I've seen some products. I don't know if they're copycat or came up around the same time, but they're claiming similar things to POCUS.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think competition is great, especially when you're creating a category. It helps honestly educate our market so that we can get to customers that are educated, and it skips a couple steps. So there's kind of two categories of competitors. The first, our biggest competitor, is still the build versus buy conversations. So we'll go into companies and they'll say, but we can build this with Looker plus Zapier plus our data warehouse plus our internal admin plus our Salesforce. And we just need like 10 full-time people to build and maintain this. And so that's genuinely what every conversation is like. And so the biggest competition for us is trying to explain to their engineering teams why it's not a good use of their time and money and resources to build this internally. Second, we have tons of startups that are being built in this space or adjacent spaces. We do have a pretty different vision than all of these other companies, which has led us to build a very different product. So I talked about our vision of being unlocking data for everyone. What that has meant is we've built a very flexible and configurable and no-code product to fit into this vision of this needs to work for sales, marketing, customer success, everyone. And they all have different needs. So we've built a fundamentally different product, whereas others in the market are building like a lead scoring product or kind of just another like Tableau dashboard. So we've taken a very different approach there.
Cool. Well, I'm very excited to see how the space develops and where you guys keep innovating in this category. As we're wrapping up and getting to the exciting lightning round, can you share, you've hit on a lot of really insightful and important points as relates to implementing a product-led sales strategy for founders that are listening, that are still, somewhat on the fence about whether or not this is right for them. Can you share, just a couple of thoughts on what are the key points how would you convince a founder who's thinking about, should I layer in product-led sales into my motion? What are some of the key points that you'd use to make that a case?
Yep. So let's say I'm talking to a founder of a Series A company. They have a really successful product-led growth motion. Maybe they have 500K to 1 million users on the product. What I would say to them is kind of, what is your ideal growth goals over the next few years? Do you have lots of runway that you can hire sales and start experimenting? Do you have only 12 months of runway and your goal is to just think about user growth rather than revenue growth? Like, what does that look like? The moment that the founder is optimizing more for revenue growth over user growth, that's probably when you want to layer in sales. And my advice would be start with 1 or 2 sellers. I mean, people always give the advice to start with 2 because then you can kind of compare their success off of each other. But it would be start small, iterate, experiment a ton with them. Maybe don't even hire a traditional seller. Maybe hire someone that was a marketer or was on a support team or was in customer success. Just someone who's kind of first principle thinker, super scrappy, super data driven, and experiment with it. So that would be kind of my advice.
I love that. And definitely echo this statement of when you hire salespeople, hire them in pairs, makes your life easier.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to keep going, but we are nearing our time. So that brings us to our exciting lightning round. If you'll indulge us, have a few more questions. What's one book, podcast, and or newsletter that you'd recommend?
So I have been listening to the 20 VC podcast by Harry Stebbings a lot. I really, really like it, especially I just listened yesterday, which is why it's top of mind. He did a podcast with 6 female sales leaders about how you scale your career in sales as well as scaling your family. So I thought that was very powerful.
Fantastic. Was this part of his 20 sales? Like his
Exactly.
sub brand? Yeah. So I love Harry and what he's doing there. Definitely highly recommend it. Cool. How about one movie, TV show, and or song that you've recently discovered?
I don't really watch that TV. I'll say I watch whatever is on my Netflix recommended list of the week. So I'm too embarrassed to tell you what that is.
Okay. No problem. What's one piece of terrible advice that you've received in your career?
Oh, I think there's, I have heard a lot of terrible advice about what you need to do to become a founder. I think there's a lot of advice that you need to be an engineer, you need to be a product manager, you need to work in tech, you can do whatever you want. There's founders from everywhere. Learning to be a founder, whatever you do, unless you've already been a founder, it's going to be a new role. It's going to be a new job. It's going to be a new set of challenges. So as long as, I think more than anything, it's the hunger, the grit, the first principle thinking, rather than if you've been a marketer or seller or a product manager.
Yeah. And even if you've been a prior founder, you have some experience in the role, but it's a new challenge and a completely new set of problems you're going to run into. Who's a mentor of yours that's had the most impact on your life or career?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I I mean there are people that I've heard speak that I think are phenomenal, and these tend to be kind of female CEOs that I can kind of resonate with and look up to. I'll say the people I lean on most in my life are kind of my family, my fiance, for in terms of understanding kind of what are choices that they've made, what do they think that, relaying my problems back to them. I'd say we definitely need more female CEOs in the world, though, for kind of younger generations of women that are looking for their mentor.
Absolutely. What SaaS tools do you love? Give me your top 3 that you're using every day.
I am a total nerd for productivity tools. So this is a great question. I could not live without Notion. Like, I am truly addicted to Notion. My team knows my love language is process and documentation. So we live in Notion. I am a huge fan of Superhuman. I think that it is such a good email tool, and they're also an incredible client of ours. So I'm a big fan of their team. Same with Figma. I think Figma has done an incredible job of not just democratizing design for product and designers, but also expanding out with other products like FigJam to access the everyday kind of person across marketing, sales, whatever it is. So I can go on and on about SaaS tools, but I'll start with those 3.
I love those picks. Really good. And it's funny you mentioned Superhuman because they're like the opposite of product led. They don't even allow you to onboard yourself. Like they're still doing, handheld onboarding.
Well, I think that goes back. I mean, they're a customer of POCUS, and which sells to product led companies. And I think it goes back to the hybrid thing we talked about. Like I signed up for Superhuman and I didn't talk to anyone, but I think the majority of people talk to an onboarding specialist. I'll also say they have some cool things that they're working on. So stay tuned on them being pure PLG.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to keep my eye out for that. I've heard a lot of great things about Superhuman, but I haven't tried it yet. Last one. What's one question you wish I'd asked that I didn't?
Oh, this is something I ask on interview questions. I don't know. I think you did an incredible job diving deep into POCUS and product-led sales. I think that maybe the founder journey and what the reality is. I think a lot of people see the founder journey to product market fit as an overnight success, and a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years later, you just blink and you have product market fit. I'd say that's not the reality. It's definitely a roller coaster of ups and downs, and being able to kind of enjoy that process is what's going to help you get to product market fit.
Great. And don't tell anybody, but a lot of my lightning round questions come from my favorite interview questions from when hiring as well. Yeah.
I love it.
Awesome. Alexa, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. Really cool stuff that you're working on. Where can people find you if they want to continue the conversation, and any last thoughts to close us out?
Yeah, thank you so much. This was incredible. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, Alexa Grabell. If you want to DM me in the community, if you go to POCUS.com/community, you can request an invite and we can also chat there.
Amazing. I'll put all those links into the show notes. Thank you again, Alexa, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Bye.